All right, everyone, welcome back to 6 Degrees of Associations presented by Big Red M. I am your host today, Casey Callanan, and we have the great pleasure of being joined by Dr. Linda Caradine-Poinsett, and she is dialing in today from Chicago. I'm going to turn the microphone over to her, have her introduce herself, and tell us all about what she does with Association Management Center.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Casey. Thanks for the invitation. As you mentioned, I'm Linda Caradine-Poinsett, and currently I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with the Association Management Center in Chicago, Illinois, or more specifically, Schaumburg, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. AMC is an association management company. And by that, I mean our clients are small association, professional associations, or nonprofits, and we help to manage those companies. So by virtue of economies of scale, we are able to help the clients extend their reach, if you will, with their staffing needs, whether that's meeting services, education, IT, marketing. We get to the privilege of servicing them that way. But we also have a consulting arm. So we spend a lot of time in governance and strategic planning, as well as leadership development. And it's interesting because when I first started in the association management space, I had not heard of neither the association management space nor association management companies. And like most people who end up in this space, you kind of stumble onto it. My career initially started in academic medical institutions. And because I was a fundraiser at the time, I ended up stumbling into the association management space. And I have to say, I didn't think I would be around as long as I have, but here I am 20 plus years later, still in this space. And it's actually been an exciting point in my life in terms of career aspirations, but it's also been from a professional development standpoint. I find myself doing things that I probably would not have had the courage to do had I stayed in perhaps a hospital setting or in the for-profit setting. I will say for women, being in the association management space has definitely given us a lot of opportunities to excel our careers from an executive level perspective.
That's a great intro. And honestly, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with my line of questioning, because I look at your background, I look at your resume, I look at your LinkedIn, I see all these different stops you've made along the way in your career. You're talking about having experience at the executive director level. You're someone that has studied law and has a law degree, an MBA. Tell me about what the path that got you to where you're at today, and we'll just start there.
So one correction, I do not have a law degree. I have a master's degree in law. So I want to make sure folks understand I cannot practice law. But I would say in terms from an academic perspective, I was always very intentional about where I wanted to go with my career. I knew I wanted to be in a space where I could potentially lead and provide guidance from a leadership perspective. And more specifically, I wanted to be at the table where decisions were being made. So I was very intentional about my academic pursuits in terms of how I would get there. So I think most of us, pursuing an MBA was pretty typical when you are looking to be in the business, in some aspect of business. But I also knew that sitting in the top seat, if you will, I needed to understand contracts or things around from a legal perspective. So that is kind of what prompted my desire to want to understand the legalities of running a business, the legal nuances that come along with that. But also because so much of my career has been in healthcare, I wanted to understand law from a healthcare perspective. Now, what prompted me to pursue a PhD? Well, that's because at one point in my life, I did think I wanted to be an MD or to pursue a degree in the clinical professions. And then I realized I couldn't stand the sight of blood, so I had to figure out a new pathway, if you will. But I also like the idea of rising to the level of academia, because I knew I also eventually wanted to teach. And having a doctorate degree was one avenue for me to be able to do that. So I do get the pleasure of crossing my two worlds, if you will, academia as well as my association management work, because I get to talk about governance. I get to talk about nonprofit. I get to talk about the financial aspects of running a nonprofit versus a for-profit. So it was intentional. The career path wasn't something that I just stumbled into in terms of how to mesh my academic education. It was something that I was very intentional about. What would the next layer of Linda's efforts to pursue leadership roles, but also to help businesses be the best that they can be from a governance perspective.
Well, thank you for that correction, because yeah, you're correct. When I saw your background, I saw PhD and I saw law, and I kind of in my head thought JD, but of course it was different. So thank you for that correction. And I want to go back to talking more about an AMC, because a lot of people who are working in associations are not necessarily familiar with the concept. I myself, who spent a lot of time working in associations, I was introduced to the concept very early on. It didn't make full sense to me right away, but once I started working with other sectional, I'll call it like sectional versions of our association, were actually managed by AMCs. So then I started learning about how that works and how it's different than the structure that we were under as an association that was not ran by an AMC. But talk to me about when a professional society, when an association, what's the threshold for when an AMC is involved and when it's not? It's probably not a direct line, but is there a general rule of thumb when they're this big, when they have this much staff? Like, how do you know when one was useful and when is not?
Well, so AMCs, association management companies, it's a different business model, no question. But I think for many people, they don't understand that AMCs are for-profit entities. They're not nonprofit entities. But the clients that we service are typically nonprofit. So they can be in healthcare, they can be in the sciences, they can be in the trade space. And for most of us, whenever we are looking for career opportunities, AMCs are probably not top of mind, just like associations aren't top of mind when people are looking at potential career opportunities. When an organization makes the decision to decide they want to be managed by a management company or an association management company, it's usually because they are looking to expand their reach. They need more staffing resources, and they can't necessarily afford to hire their own staff. Or they may be able to afford one staff person, but maybe not able to afford, a marketing person or a meetings person or an operations person. So that's when we come into play. If they want to expand their reach so that they can service their membership in a much broader way, they usually bring us into the equation. We usually find out about a client's interest in potentially working with a management company through an RFP process. They will usually cast a net of requests from companies like the Association Management Center. We get an opportunity to weigh in on it, depending on what kind of services they're saying that they want. A full service client would be a client who literally wants everything from not only having a staff dedicated as an executive director, a staff that may also be their operations person, their education person, their advocacy person. That for us is full service because they get to utilize not only our human resources, our financial services, our IT services. That for us is the full umbrella of AMC types of services. A client can, on occasion, decide that they only want a portion of our services. So maybe they can't afford to have a meetings team. So they may contract with an association management company like us to provide those kinds of services. So our team helps them source hotel space city space, helps them decide how much space they may need for their particular conference or the type of meeting. So if they decide that they want marketing services, what does that look like? If they need web services. So it just depends on the needs of a client. Each AMC has their threshold, if you will, of what they would consider to be a full service client. So I can't really say that there is a blanket umbrella because it just depends on the AMC and what their thresholds are. So for us, we have our criteria by which we look at potential clients, whether or not we have the bandwidth within our team to be able to support a client in a very specific way. So it can be very broad depending on the size of the AMC and what resources they have available. But by and large, we all pretty much follow a very similar template in terms of what the services are that we can potentially provide. So I think for the client who has to make a decision about what AMC they want to work with, I think there are a couple of things that I would encourage them to look at. One certainly is not only just the services that's provided, but whether or not it's a cultural fit, whether or not their values are in alignment, because that's going to play a big role in determining whether or not the partnership works as seamlessly as one would want that partnership to be, or whether or not it could potentially be a tumultuous relationship. So I always encourage clients when we have the opportunity to pitch for a client, I encourage them to be as open as they possibly can with the AMC, because the only way we can determine if we're providing the service that you're looking for, the optimum service that you're looking for, is if you disclose as much as possible. So it helps us make sure that we're fitting the right team together to make sure you are getting what you are basically paying for and what your expectations are from the AMC.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And first thing I'll go back to is in your answer, you mentioned that AMCs are for-profits where associations are not. The thing that I heard on a recent 6 Degrees Associations podcast episode, one that I was not hosting, my colleague and dear friend Lucas McCann was hosting, I noticed someone said, David Grindle said that, and he's an executive director, that associations are nonprofit is not a business model; it is a tax designation, and that really stuck with me. Yeah, because they have to have a for-profit mindset in everything they do, other than the tax status. So that's really helpful. First and foremost, an AMC can give you even more of a for-profit perspective as an association, and I think Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I wholeheartedly agree with your previous guest. And that's one of the things that we try to make sure that even as we're working with boards of directors, that they understand that it really is just a tax designation. But it does not mean that even though you have a nonprofit tax designation, that you don't operate from a for-profit perspective. Are you totally driven as an association? By the bottom line? No, because your mission is very altruistic, or at least academic focused, or community focused. But as an AMC, we are a for-profit, our for-profit tax status, and we do want to make sure that our clients are profitable, and not that they just look at it from the standpoint of, we're a nonprofit, we don't have to worry about the bottom line. Yes, we do, because that's the only way our clients can continue to execute on their mission. So we want them to be profitable.
And what in your mind, this doesn't have to be specific to you or anyone that you've seen, we won't call out anyone or anything like that, but what in your mind makes a good AMC? What makes a bad AMC? That's simple of a question.
I think, and one can extrapolate what you will from this, but I think when I think about a good AMC, I am talking about an AMC that can truly execute and deliver on their brand promise. If your brand promise is that you will make sure that that the quality of service that your clients is receiving lives up to that, and your clients can attest to that, to me, that denotes a good AMC. I also think that it's important that the employees that work for an AMC feel valued, and that they feel that their contributions for the organization are acknowledged, that they feel good about their work, that they feel good about the clients that they work with. But I think at the end of the day, when a client can attest to the fact that the services that they receive from the AMC, that to me is just as good as any customer satisfaction that you would get if you were working for any other business. If you're finding that you're not delivering on that brand promise, then one could extrapolate, I don't know if that's a management company that I would want to continue to work with. But I think if we look at it from that perspective, one could extrapolate what feels good. And as I mentioned earlier, if the values align, if the culture aligns, I think that goes a long way for helping a client to feel good about an AMC.
Now tell me about, compare and contrast your experiences of working directly for an association and working for an AMC. What made you, make the jump, so to speak, to the AMC side? And is there anything you miss about the association's side? Is there anything you don't miss? Tell me a little bit about that.
It's interesting. Earlier, you said that when you worked in an association, you were a little confused about the purpose of an association management company. I share that sentiment because I, too, was a little perplexed as to how it functions. I think it depends on where you are in your career trajectory. For me, my entire career has been, at least 25 years of my career has been working in what we call standalone. That means you're not managed by a management company. And so I enjoyed that for what it was. It gave me an in-depth understanding of how associations work, what the structures look like, the volunteer exposure. It gave me a lot of exposure from that standpoint. Now, being on this side, if you will, of managing association managing associations, I'm enjoying what I'm doing now, because a great deal of what I bring to the table, I think, for AMC is the fact that not only do I have a good grasp of how associations themselves tend to run, governance structures, while nuanced in some way, are very similar. And so as we start to look at how we meaning AMC, how we manage our clients, how we approach our consulting side of business, having had 20 plus years of exposure into standalone association, I feel like I have a unique perspective from that standpoint. So it makes it easier for me to relate to our clients when I'm doing a board presentation, or it helps me read between the lines sometimes when the client isn't quite sure what they're asking for. But by virtue of my experience, I can interject some of those nuances that will help to refine and provide clarity for what the client can't necessarily articulate because of either lack of experience, lack of exposure. So right now, I'm enjoying being on the association management side, because I really do believe sitting in a strategy role, it gives me a little more insight into what the clients may be looking at. And because I've worked across 4 different sectors in the association space, medical, dental, real estate, as well as in the law space, I will say across those 4 different industries, there are some very similar nuances to how their governance structures work, and how I can either support or understand the industries by which they're working in.
As someone who worked in associations, I thought it was invaluable, and I always would recommend that someone get experience working directly for an association. And I really found it beneficial to have experience working for an agency or someone that services the association industry. So talk to me about some advice you might have for an association, someone that loves working in associations, considers themselves an association lifer because of all the things, we can talk about for a long time about what's appealing about working in associations. Talk to me about why or why not you might what advice might you have for them if they were even exploring a little bit, maybe working for an AMC someday?
It's interesting. Because of the nature of AMC and the structure of the AMC, it creates opportunity for you to get your hand and exposure to clients in a very different way. Usually, if you're in a standalone, you have your assigned job, whatever that position is. However, working within an AMC, you get the opportunity to intersect with different clients who are at different levels within within the AMC, the exposure to those clients, the teams that you're working with that you get to intersect with. You have a community, for lack of a better word. You have a community of other professionals who may be doing a very similar role. And so when you're having these team conversations or resource groups, it gives you an opportunity to brainstorm with other people who are sitting in like roles or similar roles that you have. And that's under the umbrella, under the roof of an AMC. Usually other organizations we have to be members of. So let's say Association Forum or ASAE to create that community. But really within an AMC, you have kind of a built-in community of other employees who do similar roles that you have. I also think it's a great opportunity if you're looking for mentors, because you have it built within the AMC structure. If you're looking to advance your career, there are opportunities to network with other, let's say, execs or in our VPs or other individuals within the organization, where you have the freedom to have those conversations about your own career trajectory. So I think for me, that was the one plus when I worked in an AMC. I was with this particular AMC. I'm actually a boomerang. I was with this particular AMC for about 2 years, starting in 2014, before I went back to another standalone. So coming back almost 10 years later, I feel like I'm more qualified to work with the AMC on the corporate side of the business because of my years of experience working within standalone. So I personally can attest to the value of what I discovered working within an AMC earlier in my career. And now, like I said, 10 years later, coming back in a very different role, mostly on the corporate side. But it really is. I don't know how much more I can encourage young professionals to give AMCs a try when they're looking for career opportunities, because it isn't top of mind. And you hear, you may hear different things about what it means to work within an AMC. But I also think it's like any association. You find your rhythm within the organization. And if you're clear about what it is that you'd like to achieve within for your own career, besides having a job and collecting a paycheck. But if you have long-term career objectives, the AMC can afford you those opportunities, which I'm excited to share with any of my mentees that are looking for an AMC as a possible career outlet.
Awesome stuff. I want to, as we work towards wrapping up, give you an opportunity as
Time's up already.
Yeah. I mean, if you had something you wanted to make mention of course, I'll give you that opportunity as well, and a final thoughts type thing. But before we get to that, why don't you give someone a shout out, as is tradition here on the 6 Degrees of Associations? It's how we find our next guest. Typically, is there someone in the association industry, doesn't matter what part of the association industry they find themselves in, that you want to go ahead and give a tip of the cap to, that has helped you along your career and want to make mention of?
Oh gosh. Okay. So one person that comes to mind, her name is Wylisha Wiggs Harris. Wylisha and I probably met about 10 years ago at a CEO retreat that was hosted by the association, the American Society of Association Executives. And one of the things that I've always admired about Wylisha is her passion for the healthcare industry. Her career has primarily been in the healthcare space, but she has a great deal of passion for that. And she is that person that you would enjoy talking to when you just feel overwhelmed. But her spirit is such that she always manages to find the silver lining and the pluses in what it is that you may be doing as an individual contributing to a greater cause. So, but she would be someone from a guider, from a mentor, from a spiritual guidance person, but also I admire the work that she's done in helping to turn around associations that may have been struggling before she came on board to lead the organization through some tumultuous times. So she would be the one person. The second person that comes to mind is Veronica Munoz. She was actually my boss when I was with the American Bar Association. These are individuals who are asset managers. But Veronica was also another person who I just admire her confidence in terms of her leadership style. The fact that when she and I first met each other, I was more advanced in my career, but she was willing to give me a shot in helping her run her department. So for the level of confidence was something that I really admired about Veronica.
That is awesome. Two people we have not heard from yet on our show, and I will be excited to hope
their contact if you like.
Of course, yeah, we'll hear from them hopefully soon. Be humble, work hard, be kind, stay. I'm trying to read the sign behind your head there. Okay, stay humble, be kind, work hard. Those are amazing parting words. I'll just say, is there anything else you wanted that you would be remiss if you didn't mention before we end it here?
No, but thank you for mentioning that, because that to me, that's kind of how I like to live my life. But I also, it's kind of a mantra that I use even just in my work. Because sometimes this work can get very frustrating. You're dealing with a lot of different personalities, and some personalities are stronger than others, and it can make work extremely challenging. So I'm always reminded that, what I bring to the table, it's not without humility. Because I truly believe in my soul that my role here on this earth is to teach, help, and guide. Whether it's with the work that I do with AMC, the Association Management Center, or whether it's with the students that I teach in academia. I worked really hard to achieve what I've achieved, and I just am always eager to share the knowledge that I have, the experience that I've gained over the years. And I think part of my job is helping to lift up and provide guidance and be a solid resource for others, whether those are leaders, CEOs, running companies that happen to attend one of our exceptional boards courses, or whether it's a junior staff member on, our team at AMC. I truly believe that that's what my calling is on this universe, on this earth.
Dr. Linda Caradine-Poinsett. She is the Chief Strategy Officer with Association Management Center, and we are so lucky and thankful to have had her as a guest today on our show. Thank you again.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.